Started. So hello everyone and welcome to the 7th annual Applied Anthropology Expo. I am Lisa Henry, the chair of the Department of Anthropology at UNT. I hope that you have been able to take a look at some of the career posters that we have up on the website. They will remain on the website indefinitely. But it is my pleasure to start the career panel by introducing your MC for the evening, Dr. Jamie Johnson. She will be leading us tonight, as she has done most fabulously for the past many years. Like I said, I'll be dropping the Google form link in the chat for you to fill out for extra credit and drop your name and email for raffle prizes. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
Thanks so much, Dr. Henry. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know that this pulls you away from an exciting Winter Olympic curling event, but I hope that the sacrifice will be well worth it. As Dr. Henry pointed out, my name is Jamie Johnson, and I'm a senior lecturer here, and I'm honored to be the MC for this year's Alumni Making a Difference Award announcement and career panel. So I'd like to begin with the award ceremony, as it were. So each year, the Department of Anthropology faculty vote to honor one of our undergraduate or graduate alumni as the recipient of the Alumni Making a Difference Award. The candidate selection criterion includes, but is not limited to, alumni who contribute to policy, hold a leadership role in their organization, participate in active advocacy or in activism, or both, teach or make an educational impact in their organization, practice applied research as a part of their daily work, and or perform consultations with recommendations leading to implementation. And so I'm pleased to introduce this year's Alumni Making a Difference awardee, Janelle Robles. So Janelle was kind enough to send us her bio. I know, give her multiple rounds of applause. So Janelle is a bilingual criminal law attorney and third-generation Harris County resident. That's the Houston area, for those of you who are not familiar with Texas geography. She currently serves as an assistant public defender, representing those charged with crimes who cannot afford to hire an attorney, and previously served as a prosecutor representing victims of domestic violence. While at UNT, she participated in the National Science Foundation Summer Research Experience in Anthropology, became a McNair Scholar, was involved with numerous student organizations, and earned the James Carl Matthews Award. Janelle received her bachelor's in anthropology with a minor in Mexican American Studies. After college, she worked for and volunteered for immigrant rights organizations such as the renowned national legal civil rights nonprofit, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. While working for TCJC on the Reconciliation Project with now Houston City Councilwoman Tarsha Jackson, Janelle advocated for and advanced criminal justice reform issues at the City of Houston, Harris County, and Austin levels at the state legislature. But Janelle wanted to do more. So she returned to school to obtain her Juris Doctorate from the South Texas College of Law, Houston, where her advocacy and service earned her the Dickerson Moore Humanitarian Award, the Lyndon B. Johnson Civil Rights Award, and a pro bono honors certificate. After becoming licensed in 2016, Janelle worked as an immigration attorney, representing persons seeking asylum and persons caught up in deportation proceedings. She currently serves her community as board president for a grassroots immigrant disability rights organization, Living Hope Wheelchair Association, and as vice president for the Mexican American Bar Association of Houston. And fun fact, Janelle is also running for judge in the March 2022 primary for Harris County Criminal Court at Law, number 2, the misdemeanor court handling low-level offenses. And so I'd like to add another award onto Janelle's resume, dossier, as it were. And Janelle, in recognition of your work as a assistant public defender at Harris County Public Defender's Office, among your many other accomplishments, we thank you for your outstanding contribution towards advocacy and social justice, and for setting a shining example for future UNT anthropology alumni. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd like to turn the floor over to you if you have any remarks, speech.
Yes, briefly, thank you. And just thank you to Danielle for making me cry. And Jamie for your presentation. I am honored and grateful for this recognition. I had no idea we had this recognition for alumni. I'm grateful that the faculty at UNT chose me. I have very fond memories from my time at UNT as an undergrad there, studying with Profe as my mentor. Took a lot of transformative classes with Profe, Latinos in the US, and also with Dr. Henry, Gender and Cross-Cultural Perspectives, and Dr. Alicia Recruz, the Migrant and Refugees course. And so, thank you for this recognition. I've carried anthropology with me throughout my career. Currently, as a public defender, most of my clients are immigrants, and most of them are foreign born. Most of them are from Latin American countries and regions. And so I've used my background in anthropology to advocate for them as an attorney. When most of the interactions that they have with law enforcement, with the justice system, judges, prosecutors, and even defense attorneys are from individuals who don't understand their language or their cultural background and don't take the time to understand them. And then through my work, I've found multiple instances of misunderstanding linguistically, also issues of stereotypes and racial profiling. So I've used my training in anthropology, for example, the knowledge that there's no particular culture or ethnicity that is more likely to commit crimes than any other culture or ethnicity. Or there's no cultural characteristic for any particular group that that shows that they are scammers or commit fraud or that sort of thing. So last year, I had one interesting case that I worked on with another public defender for an individual who is Cuban and was charged with a crime of credit card skimming. And he was caught up, arrested by an officer who was part of an initiative known as the Old Clothes Initiative or Ropa Vieja Initiative. It's a multi-agency task force, multi-level local, state, and federal agencies. But it really bothered me and a few of my other colleagues because the initiative is named after the beloved national dish of Cuba, Ropa Vieja, and the initiative primarily has targeted Cuban individuals. So this was one of the first times where we challenged these types of cases. And we were able to bring in an anthropologist from Florida to testify at the hearing. We were able to win that case, but we were really trying to show the discrimination, the fact that Cubans are not more likely to commit crimes than other groups, that it is not a cultural characteristic of Cubans to commit fraud, to be fraudsters or scammers. The lead officer and agent in this case was alleging that it's a cultural characteristic of Cubans to commit fraud and scams. And that 100% of the individuals he had arrested, except for one individual, were of Cuban descent. He also made some very discriminatory statements about Cubans on one of the videos. that we were lucky to have, because otherwise most of the time these officers don't have undercover don't have videos, but we were able to catch that statement, and that's what helped us to fight this case. And so ever since then, a lot of defense attorneys have started fighting these cases. Um, and so, yeah, so I mean, that's sort of some of the ways that anthropology has helped me. I'm excited to talk about some of the other ways it has helped me, multiple other examples, and to encourage other students that are majoring in anthropology to go into policy and law, to because there's a huge intersection between anthropology, law, and policy. So thank you so much for the award and the recognition. I'm honored, and I'm excited to speak to the students.
Well, then I guess we shall kick off. Dr. Henry, do you want to pin our panel participants? And so the first thing that we'd like to ask the panelists to do is to go down. I don't have you in order, but so we'll do first come, first serve. If you would kindly introduce yourselves and say where you work, or perhaps what your job title is. And so once we do that, then we'll begin with the first of 3 question sets. The first question set is going to be about skills. The second is the job market, and finally networking. And so I'm going to put up my grid here. Who would like to kick us off?
I'll go.
All right, Isabel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Clary. I'm a Haitian anthropologist, and I work where I'm from. So I work in Haiti right now. Hi, Dr. Henry. And right now I have a few hats, which is sort of typical for someone like me. But right now I am the director of impact at a firm that does business development services. So mostly we work in development projects. I'm also the founder and director of a soon to be think tank that was originally called a research institute. But when you say research institute in development sectors, everybody's like, oh God, no. So when you say think tank, everybody's get really excited. So that's what I'm doing. I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later, but that's what I'm doing right now. I'm also a researcher for a firm in the US that does a lot of work in diversity and inclusion. So we just did a job, for instance, for Meta. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice to have you. Let's see, in my list, Erica looks like she's in line.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm Erica Habermail. I actually just started a new position. So I now work as an evaluation associate at Syracuse University's Institute for Veterans and Military Families. I'm very excited about the role. It's been a dream of mine for quite a while. So I'm very excited to be finally doing this work. So I help nonprofit programs that are serving military families and veterans do program evaluations so that they can both better meet the needs of their beneficiaries, but also in many cases they are writing policies. And then the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, not in my branch, but also does a ton of work on Capitol Hill and in DC doing policies specifically towards veteran engagement and veteran betterment. So that's where I am today. I also volunteer as a lead researcher for Our Military Kids, another military serving nonprofit, and help them in writing and developing their strategic plans.
Thank you. Nice to have you. Kathy.
Hi, I haven't seen the Drs. Henry in so long. I'm Kathy White, and I work at the Sacramento County Office of Education here in Central California. And in our state, we have organization around counties, with the county office providing and overseeing education in an entire county. Thanks to this program, I am working in the research, assessment, and evaluation department, where I get to do a lot of different things. I do evaluations of both educational programs and also programs for the city and county of Sacramento. currently around gang prevention activities, actually. I also do a lot of looking at outcome data for students, and we do a lot of work at looking at disparities between both racial and ethnic groups and other groups of students as well, like foster and homeless youth, English learners, and students with disabilities. So it's really a mix and match kind of job, which is wonderful. And anthropology has served me well in every task that I have had to undertake.
Great. So nice to have you, Kathy. Danielle. You are muted.
How about now? Excellent. I don't use Zoom because I work for Google. And so this is like the second time I've used this tool. I apologize. And I was actually saying thank you to Janelle for the tears. For those of you who don't know, Janelle was one of my very first students at UNT. And so it's incredible to see how far Janelle has come from being like 19 and just starting out to this amazing person. I'm going to cry again. I'm going to stop doing this. Okay. My name is Danielle Rios Prince. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a senior UX research lead at Google. And I work primarily in Google Legal, which is our internal legal department. And I also head up UX research, the UX research team for google.org. And so google.org might be something that people are more familiar with, which is like all of the philanthropic endeavors that Google does, whether it's volunteering, monetary donations, or support for nonprofits, education. So I work with the team who like make sure that all the tooling is working and doing the right things, and also support the Google Fellows program, in which that's when Googlers go out to nonprofits all over the world and donate their time, and Google foots the bill. So make sure that the UX researchers on those teams have the support they need, have the tools they need to help the communities that they're serving. I'm actually a graduate of the Fellows program. I worked with the Trevor Project for about a year, and it was an incredible experience. Love everybody there. They're also hiring a UX researcher if y'all are interested. I can like pass it along. I consider myself an anthropologist, and I always will, and that's what's in my title at Google. And there is actually a handful of us who do that, and it's done with intention because it's what drives our research methods and our approach, and it often like prompts questions from folks, and that's exactly what it is that I want to do. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm going to tap you for a specific question about that then when we get to the job market talk. Thanks, Danielle. Molly, hello.
Hey everyone, my name is Molly Bayer. So most recently I've been working at RTI International. It's a research nonprofit that primarily does work for consulting work for the federal government. For the last year I've been on primarily NIH, CDC, and FDA projects. I am actually leaving RTI. My last week was last week, and I have a new role lined up, but I haven't announced where it is. So check my LinkedIn in about a week or two. I've also been doing consulting on the side, primarily in patient experience research for a group called Savvy Cooperative. Lots of interviewing folks with particular diseases to try to understand how they deal with that and their experience of those diseases. I guess to talk about my job titles over the course of my career, I've had several different job titles, most of them having research in the name. Had and strategy in some way. Most recently, my title was senior strategist. I've had titles of evaluation researcher, UX researcher, principal researcher, and I do research. If you can't tell by now, applied research. I use both traditional qualitative and evaluation methods as well as user experience and service design methods in my work, and I am consider myself a health generalist. So I've worked on a lot of different health topics, from healthcare delivery to global health, local, federal, public health. So don't stray too far from health, but I do consider myself a health generalist. Thanks.
Great. Nice to have you, Molly. Janelle, I know you've already introduced yourself. Will you do it one more time for us? I know this is
Janelle Robles. I work for the Harris County Public Defender's Office in Houston, Texas. I'm an assistant public defender. I'm one of the few bilingual defense attorneys in the county. So most of my clients are Spanish speakers. And my focus and goal with them is to ensure that they have fairness, equity, are treated equally, and make sure trying to mitigate immigration consequences for them as well.
Great, thank you. Hello, Autumn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Autumn McDonald, and I work at ADM Insights and Strategy. I'm actually the owner of the company. The company's been around 6 years, and in terms of title, separate from being owner, I describe myself as an insights maven, anthropologist, and market researcher. Our company does mixed methods work, so qualitative and quantitative. We do work across 6 continents, although recently our work has predominantly been in 4 continents: Asia, North America, Africa, and Europe. And while most of our clients are multinational corporations, we also do a fair amount of social impact work focused on BIPOC constituents.
Fantastic. Let's see, I don't think I missed anyone. All right. So I think we're going to pin our speakers, and we'll begin with the first set of questions, which are going to speak to your skill sets. And so most of the people here are anthropology students. And so we're really interested to know what skills that you all learned in the program that you use most often in your career. And of course, you can feel free to elaborate on your position a little bit more as you answer the questions, so that the audience gets a sense for the context. So Isabel, can I call on you to kick us off?
Sure. I think one of the things that's been, I'm trying to think if it's the most valuable. It's definitely been very, very valuable. And it's been just the way that we learned how to code. That's been very valuable because I don't get hired as an anthropologist. So a lot of times my super rigorous methodologies where I will interview and transcribe and code, that's not always received because there's always a tight timeline, or the way that people want to have these engagements is a little bit, it's framed already, so I can't impact that. But coding has been really very valuable to me and some of the teams I've worked with, to sort of show them like everybody's notes, here's what you do. So it's challenged a lot of our assumptions going into the work. It's challenged our assumptions after we've had these conversations. We're like, oh yeah, everybody talked about this all the time. But then we go to code it and we're like, oh, it actually just came up the one time. Whoops. So that's been really, really very valuable. And for me, in the work that I've done, I think anthropology has been, it's very like, kind of like Danielle, I'm very intentional in saying that I'm an anthropologist, because in some spaces, it immediately challenges everybody. And they also ask a lot of questions, like, there's those tropes like, oh, do you dig up bones? It gets weird. Or they're like, what does that mean? So it's always, we're academics, right? So any chance to plug in what we do, we're happy to do that. And I think one of the things that's been really valuable for me as an anthropologist is this capacity to sort of be a chameleon. So I adapt in all of the contexts that I work with. So I work largely in development, so aid and development. I'm from a third world country, so we're sort of a trope for that. But I've worked across literally every sector. I've worked in business, I've worked in public sector, I've worked in, I don't want to say with public sector, let's just say in parallel public sector. I've worked with multi and bilaterals. I've done environmental work. I've done gender-based work. I've done human rights work. So my ability to sort of adapt to all of these different contexts, I associate very largely to anthropology, because I approach every sort of context, be it an organization or a different field that I'm not familiar with, I always approach it as, okay, let's just think of this as a culture. And let's look at this as just this big system. And there's going to be all of these patterns and how do they all fit together? And I can adapt very, very quickly to these different contexts and catch up very quickly and sort of pick up the lingo. I think one of the things that's been interesting also is that I can pick up on the patterns without having to know the technicalities. So I don't necessarily need to know, what a UX researcher does, but when I end up in that context, I can be like, this is how you engage with the people that you engage with, and these are the problems, and these are the challenges, and these are the strengths, and I can see things a little bit differently than most of the people on the teams around me who see something as very like tactile, or they see it as, oh, this is a process. And I was like, well, the process is subjective, right? He sees it differently, he sees it differently. And I've been able again to adapt very quickly to like multicultural teams, which for some reason, people are like, oh, that's a job requirement now, is being able to adapt to a multicultural team. And I was like, doesn't everybody do that? I'm just, so it always sort of boggles my mind a little bit, but definitely anthropology has made me, this idea of me being a chameleon across the board has been really, really the thing that's been helpful. And especially in a context like development, and I'm not going to take too much time, but there's all these approaches and all of these methodologies, and Dr. Henry can speak a little bit to this about how I drove him crazy with this, but the approaches that I see are problematic at the core. And so being an anthropologist, I challenge them a lot because I'm like, okay, but where are the people that you're speaking for? People, like, I don't hear them in any of this. So a lot of the work that I've done over the last few years has been to challenge these assumptions of development, to sort of shift the paradigm. Jamie, you're muted.
My space bar didn't work. Erica, could you talk a little bit about the skills that you learned in the program that you use most in your current position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that project management and project development were by far the tools that I learned through the program that I use most often and most thoroughly. I came into the program very fortunately with a strong background in qualitative and quantitative data analysis and data collection. So I guess at least from our program, even though I use them daily, wouldn't say that like that's something from the program that I use most often, but definitely the project management and development. But piggybacking off of Isabel's comments, I think what has been most critical for me is storytelling. Before going through UNT's program, I didn't necessarily have a very good grasp of how to take data, particularly our qualitative data, intermix that with our quantitative data into a really cohesive story that guides somebody from the beginning to the end, while getting them to the conclusion that you need, while keeping in the context of everything and keeping it interesting, because data is great, but stories are engaging. And a story and a quote is always going to be more engaging than a pie chart. It's always going to stick with a reader better than a graph. And so that has been, for me, both the benefit of anthropology and I think something that UNT has done spectacularly well, is giving students those skill sets to be able to tell a story through their research, because that's what gives the most impact.
Very cool. Thanks, Erica. Kathy, how about you?
Okay, so I unfortunately have to use the quantitative data training that I got a lot more than I ever dreamed I would. And I just want to say, if you still have that SPSS survival manual, never throw it away. I had to re-buy it because I needed it again. But piggybacking on what everybody else has said, Dr. Lisa Henry, I don't know if you remember saying this or if you say it every semester, but you told me that our work is to be a professional newbie. And I've taken that, and it allows me to go to my job, jump into a whole new area without fear, without imposter syndrome, and to be able to really ask a question so I can understand and do my job better. And that has stuck with me for what I graduated in 2013, I think, and I still think of that all the time. Like, we are trained by your program to see the unseen. And especially in education, there's a bunch of people there that cannot see because they're in their bureaucracy, they're in their teacher training, and they're not seeing the students and the communities anymore because they're so stuck. And just being able to reveal the unseen in the way that we're taught in the program has been really helpful to me.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Molly, how about you? I mean, you've had a number of different roles, but what kinds of skills did you learn in the program that kind of carry you through all of the various roles that you've held?
Yeah, I think like the obvious answer is research, like learning how to do research, learning how to scope it, learning how to do it, learning how to deliver it and package it, as Erica talked about. But I guess I want to talk about maybe something that's like less obvious, because even though I think that's the skill I use the most, I think like these other things are more unique potentially. I think anthropologists and the program teaches us very well to think about like both macro environments and like the very specific personal and micro environments. And that's something that other disciplines, I guess I knew that was a thing while I was in grad school, but I didn't realize the extent to which other people don't think about this in this way or problems in this way. And so you'll like a lot of, not to hate on one discipline or anything, but like psychologists are a lot of times thinking about like the interpersonal only, and rarely are they zooming out thinking historically or in terms of policy or more holistically. And I think anthropologists and myself kind of have a knack for saying, okay, like what is the individual experience here and how does that tie into a number of different things in macro environments, whatever that may be. And public health, you know, has started to do this with L7 MPH, did the dual program. You know, public health does this with like a socio-ecological model. And so you'll see it like more in public health context, but like in clinical or medical contexts, you won't necessarily see that. And then the other thing I'll say is, this sounds maybe silly or basic, but like I didn't know what an informational interview was before coming into the program. And like Christina Watson like drilled it into our heads to do, you're interested in it, do an informational interview. And I just like both in my actual job and in like my broader career and job searching and figuring out what I like and what I want to do, I've done so many informational interviews. And so I think the kind of professional newbie, like in the workplace, being able to go and just like have a very casual conversation, but asking questions and being able to keep it conversational and not super formal, but finding out a ton of information where somebody else might not go in and try to gather that context. I don't know that I always call them informational. I don't call them informational interviews most of the time, but I think that's a skill that I absolutely use probably every week in my job and my career.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Danielle, how about for you? What kinds of skills did you learn in the program that carry you on today?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that y'all can see us all nodding our heads and like, yes, 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 yes. All those things are absolutely it. Can give you examples and stories about how each one like was critical to something. And for me, there have been different ones at different points in my career. And so very early on in my career, being able to like not only articulate findings in a narrative style like Erica was talking about, but also being able to translate what I do. Because oftentimes you go into spaces and folks have no idea what it's like anthropologists do, or they have no idea that surveys are quantitative research methods. And so you have you have to pick these things apart and know who you're talking to and how to speak their language. So there's like this translation that happens that we're taught to do, especially in this program. And I think it was also the Henrys, one of them, who talked about us being translators of our skills into the world, and then also who the people we're working with, and like the conversations back and forth. That's our role, is to be this intermediary when there's not somebody there. or when conversations are passing each other, because we can see a bigger picture, or we try to, or step back and at least ask the question, I have no idea. Can you tell me more? And so very early in my career, like that's what helped me the most. Now, it is interviewing skills. So my particular brand of interviewing comes directly from sitting across the table from Dr. Doug Henry and not making any sort of movements with my face other than pleasant engagement while other people said ridiculous things. And that was how we practiced, because it's like you're going into these spaces and you don't know what people are going to say, and it could be completely offensive to you, but you have no idea what the context of it is. And so you practice these things, and you practice say it's like open-ended questions and managing your tone and your cadence. And I can turn it on and I can turn it off, even to the point where like my husband and my family is like, please don't talk to me in interview voice. Like start moderating it. But that has gone from it's like, because I very rarely do what we call individual contributor work, which is actually, it's like research on the ground. It's rare that I actually get to do that anymore. But when I did, that's the skill that I used quite a bit. Now, as a manager and as a lead, I use that skill again when what we call managing up. So that's when you're talking to folks who have a bigger say in whatever it is you're doing. And that could be a policymaker, or that could be a VP. And that interviewing skill and the way that you phrase questions and respond helps tremendously, and understanding what it is that people are really asking for, and especially if they've already made a decision in their head, and pulling that out.
Awesome, Danielle. Thank you so much. Janelle, what kinds of skill sets do you feel carry you through in the work that you do?
So similar to a lot of what the other participants have said, and Danielle, one of the major things that I have taken from the program at UNT is the emphasis on doing applied work, and using our education and our training to solve real world problems. So when we look at when there's a problem, identify the problem, and then what can we do to go help solve that problem? And hopefully, what can we do to solve it on a systemic, large scale level, to impact as many people as possible. Some of the other skills that I've used are building a rapport with individuals from different cultural backgrounds. When I'm appointed to represent an individual, first thing I ask them is, what country are you from? Where were you born? Because I also I work closely with immigration attorneys at my office who advise me on how these charges are going to impact them. And so rapport is something very important also, because they need to know that I need to know everything. So they need to trust me to tell me everything that happened, and kind of get comfortable with me so that I can most effectively advocate for them on their behalf and also tell their story. So interviewing skills as well. I have a lot of questions to ask when I first meet them. Definitely demographic background, but also in terms of what happened when they were arrested, or for whatever brought them into contact with the criminal justice system. And then storytelling is another skill that I gained from the program, and that I use a lot, because I used that to relay a story to a district attorney to try to convince them to be reasonable and fair with my client. Or if it's in front of a judge, telling the client's story to try to help get them out on bond, especially because they are poor and they can't afford bond. And also to bring across the story in front of juries, so that they can rule in our, they can, kind of give us the outcome that we want. And interestingly, transcribing is also an interesting skill that I use, because I have to watch hours of body camera videos from the police officers to see what the interactions were and what the statements were. So I type up a lot on that. So I'm grateful to the program for teaching me that, because I can type really fast now. And then I, copy those conversations and send it to the DA to say, look, this is where the issue happened. If you look at this particular video at this minute, this second, this is where the misunderstanding happened. This is, so there's a lot of skills that I've used from anthropology. Linguistics has also helped a lot when I'm representing clients. I'm of Mexican heritage, so I'm Mexican American, but I have clients who are also Honduran, Salvadoran, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Guatemalan, everything. And so when I meet a client, there's often, they speak, sometimes they speak faster than I do. Sometimes they say terms or phrases that I don't understand. So I have to ask them to elaborate and to explain it to me in a different way. And then sometimes that ends up explaining where there was miscommunication and misunderstanding when they interacted with law enforcement. So those are the different ways that I use the skills in anthropology.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Autumn, how do you use the skills that you learned in the program in the work that you do?
So, I have to say that the program at UNT really elevated my skills as a researcher and also as a businesswoman. I came into the program already having 20 years of research experience at Fortune 500s. And, in market research on the client side, oftentimes you're combining qualitative and quantitative research together to obtain learnings. But what I really learned at UNT was how to triangulate more deeply and how to bring in a greater breadth of sources, looking across society to extract more meaningful learnings. And that has really benefited us at our company, and our clients have been incredibly impressed by what we've been able to tease out. Just as an example, we recently completed a project in 5 countries, and we triangulated 102 sources of data on that project. And by doing so, we're able to uncover much more deep cultural context and human understanding than if we had simply combined the qual and quant by themselves. So that has been huge for me. The other thing is, UNT taught me how to study people. Obviously, we're anthropologists, but that's been useful in studying my clients, because sometimes I don't understand where they're coming from or why their heels are dug in on something. And I had one client that was just insisting we use a specific framework. And I was thinking, this framework is contrary to the research objectives. It's contrary to what we're trying to achieve. And so the anthropologist in me said, let's set up a meeting and listen. In other words, a semi-structured interview. And she doesn't know that I'm interviewing her. But coming out of that, I was able to understand the reason why her heels were dug in and she was holding on was this framework was part of their company's creation narrative. It was part of their identity. And so to lose that was challenging, even though she could acknowledge it was contrary to what she herself was trying to achieve. So being an anthropologist has taught me to study my clients. It's also, you mentioned, I think it was Isabel, you mentioned coding, I think. And, I don't love coding, but taking the extra detailed field notes has been so important for when we do choose to code field notes, because we're not always coding transcripts. Sometimes we're coding field notes, but even then just going back to the field notes and pulling things out if we need to review video footage, it lets us get there much faster. And then lastly, and I'm struggling to figure out how to articulate this, but the anthropology program at UNT taught me how to simultaneously think more critically and be unassuming, and to do that in the same moment. So to know that I'm going into situations and I have to let go of what I think I might know and be forever the newbie, while at the same time critically assessing things that are assumed to be a certain way. So for example, if a client assumes that says they've always given money to Feeding for America, and this is a real situation, money to Feed for America, and that's their outreach to help BIPOC constituents. That's their world. I have to critically assess, well, why does that have to be? And I have to be open at the same time to hearing their answer. I don't know if I'm making sense to you all, but being unassuming and critical at the same time, that then frees my mind to see new possibilities. And then to share those new possibilities with my clients that they themselves had never considered before. And I learned that at UNT. That's it.
These are all so brilliant. Coding and seeing patterns, storytelling, SPSS survival manuals, thinking holistically, considering context, translation and acting as an intermediary, using one's interview voice appropriately or strategically, building rapport, especially cross-culturally, triangulation and listening. And I was thinking maybe this sounded a little bit like critical reflexivity, all of these things, and some shout outs to professors. I also wanted to encourage everybody who's in the audience right now to check out the chat and interact in that way. If it's sometimes a little bit less onerous to just pop your voice in there. So these are all things that you've learned in the program, but as we've learned about you a little bit more, we know that you have a lot of different sorts of roles. And so we were hoping to know if you have any additional training, either self-guided training or certifications or even another degree, and how that kind of training impacted your career. And would you recommend doing something like that to others? Isabel, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I do actually have, I have another master's in nonprofit management. I've done a series of trainings in policy. The Institute for Development Studies in Oxford, they have a really, really fantastic virtual program. I recently completed a human rights policy training with the OAS, which was absolutely disastrous. It was no online UNT. But it was a total disaster. But I have a certificate that I couldn't tell you what I'm going to do with. But I also did a training with AMI, the Montessori Institute, for an adolescent training program. So I don't know if anybody is familiar with Montessori, but Montessori is actually based on anthropological approaches. So I'm a Montessori baby. My mother has a Montessori school. So of course you work at Google, of course. So we're trying to do the adolescent program. And so we're going to do that this year. So I will be doing the anthropology side of that program. And I think it's definitely valuable. And I think what's interesting, and I hope this is what stands out to the students who are here tonight, is that all the anthropologists present are somehow activists. So we're all working in the nonprofit space. We're all trying to act as advocates inside of our organizations because we understand something a little bit differently than the people around us. We're always going to see something a little bit different. And so in my thesis work at UNT, I looked at a lot the power dynamics that happen in development, and I challenged the paradigms that are currently in existence, especially in a country like Haiti that's been subject to development and all forms of colonialism. I challenge these models a lot because I argued, and to this day, this is what I'm arguing. This is what my think tank is based on. And this is what all of the investors and the partners that I'm engaging right now, this is what I tell them, is that the data at the source is, I use the word corrupted because, and it's, I think it's, I forget who was talking about how you show up, but I think how you show up in a community is the most important part of an entire information process. In a country like mine, I can tell you, when you show up in a community, the way you show up is going to impact everything from the way you collect the data, the quality of the data you're going to collect, and the decisions that are going to be made on top with the data you've collected in the field. And that's a problem, because people show up, if foreigners show up and they go into these communities and they don't acknowledge power dynamics, they try to do some sort of weird assimilation thing where they try to speak like the locals and just come off really, really ridiculous. I myself, I'm a native anthropologist, but in Haiti, I am on a spectrum. There's an actual like color and class spectrum. So I am on the more privileged side of that spectrum. And I have to acknowledge that. I have to be on, there's another thing that you should be aware of is when you're an anthropologist, especially if you're working in development and in advocacy, and actually probably just true in general, is you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to be very open with yourself and know where you are and know how you're going to show up and how you're going to present yourself and know what you're capable of taking on, really. Because when I go into the field, I have to acknowledge that I'm on a privileged spectrum and I'm not very well perceived in certain parts of the country. And so when I get out there, people don't know that I'm Haitian. Like, they may not know that there's Haitians that look like me. Like, we're very disconnected as a country. So when I go out there, I have to do something. So when we were talking about rapport building, I have to break down those power dynamics. I have to break down those barriers. And in Haiti, we're very, we love to mock each other. Honestly, if somebody doesn't mock you, they don't respect you. Like, that's what I can tell you. I have to subject myself to that, and it's fine. I mean, it's fine. It's not very harsh mockery or anything. But in my field work, that was one of the things that I had to learn is how do I get people to trust me and open up to me by shifting that power dynamic? Because when I show up, I'm in the position of power. So how do I shift that power? And it's always in everything that all of the participants said. It's asking questions, it's showing up as a professional Nubian, and just really being humble about what I don't know. And so when I show up in a community and it's like, hey, what's this plant right here? And everybody's like, okay. And so they want to teach me something, and it shifts the power dynamic, and it makes the information that I receive from them much more genuine, much more accurate, and much more reflective of what they actually want themselves, so that they're not telling me what they think I want to hear. So that's super, super important to me. But I think definitely, I went way off tangent, I apologize. But I think the trainings that students can look at are, I mean, there's so many things that are available, but I think definitely looking at policy. It's not necessarily for how you engage with public policy. You don't have to be, at the, on the front lines of an advocacy program, but really understanding how these systems are built on paper, and understanding how you can challenge them, and how the smallest little thing can have the biggest impact. And I think anthropologists are poised to do this. And that was one of the biggest things in my thesis research, where I challenged anthropology as a field, where please step up. Please, we need more anthropologists to do social justice and development work. We need more anthropologists in the development sector, because it's a problem. Everybody in all of the evaluation methodologies, I'm sure Molly knows this, anybody doing evaluation in development, they're all using ethnographic methodologies. They're all using sort of these quasi-ethnography approaches, and they're not doing it well. They're not doing it right, you guys. It's really, really annoying. And then they keep innovating and naming it something different. There's an actual thing called adaptive management. If you go somewhere new, you adapt to that content. That's what adaptive management basically is. It's ridiculous. So we need more anthropologists to actually inform these processes and to challenge all of the things that have been happening just throughout time that have stayed stagnant. So we need an anthropologist to come and just stir things up.
Thanks, Isabel. Erica, how about you? Any training, additional training outside the program? And if so, how has it impacted your career?
Yeah, So first and foremost, while I was still at UNT, I did a Geographic Information Sciences certificate, which was so crucial. I kind of became the in-house map maker at my last company because nobody else knew how to make maps. But I think even more importantly than being able to spatially lay out data, which is just so important. Even if you you don't have to get an entire certificate, take a class. We have a great GIS department. We have a great geography department. They have an applying GIS course that is designed for people outside of their department in college. So please just take the one course. It's a great introduction. But one thing that working in GIS kind of exposes you to incidentally is programming. So as part of my certificate, I had to learn Python. My fiance is in IT. I will not say that I can speak Python language by any means. Comparatively to him, I can maybe make a sentence. But the understanding of the logic frames, right? How to read a logic statement, how to understand the way those things have been set up, opens the door to basically every other programming language and allows you an easier time into the backend syntax of SPSS. It allows you an easier time into the syntax of SAS. It allows you an easier access into any type of online surveying platform when you need to do something specific. That happened to my last company when we were working with conjointly. We had to do a couple of custom programming things where I had to go into the back end and just either write some code myself or have our developer write some code and then me edit it for every single consecutive project to make it custom to the new one. So basics in programming, basics in geographic information systems, I think are key. Beyond that, if you can get any hands on graphic design or understanding how to read a brand book, that has also been instrumental, especially when working for nonprofits. I know I have been much more successful with those clients being able to match my outputs to whatever they have in their outputs. And that can be as simple as just matching the fonts and the color scheme. But having just the background in graphic design and reading a brand book to be able to do that is a really quick afternoon of self-teaching that can help you so much in the future. And I think those are the ones that have been biggest for me, though I will say that if you talk to pretty much any anthropologist, they are going to give you a list of skills that they learned outside of anthropology. So one of the roles that I have had, I guess I'm still technically in it, I'm the co-chair for the 2019 American Anthropology Master's Career Survey. But one of the things that we found through that survey is that 86% of our respondents, I pulled up our PowerPoint in the background to make sure I got the statistic correct, but 86% of our respondents agreed that skills learned outside of anthropology are critical to their career. So even if you are enthralled with the UNT program, even if you think that anthropology is the most amazing thing on the face of the planet, because let's face it, it is, collect those skills whenever you can, because it's crucial in an applied job market. It truly is.
Great. Thank you so much, Erica. I love the shout out to anthropology proselytizing. Yes, please. You too, Isabel. Kathy, any additional training that you've used, and if so, or that you've received, and how has it helped you in your career?
Well, disclaimer, I paid for grad school by being a programmer and a database developer, and maybe it's because I was already pretty fluent in that kind of stuff, but I still use programming and database management as a shortcut when I want to be really creative about how I'm putting data sets together. So if you're looking for an extra skill in GIS, oh, I so agree with you, Erica. That's a great technical skill to add on. But even database management, even if it's just access, will serve you very well. Even learning functions in Excel will serve you very well. Those little things that you can do with Excel, even if it's just filtering or simple formulas, really translate well into the workplace. So data visualization is a thing now. And Danielle, I'm reading your coworker's storytelling with data book as part of a book study at my office right now. And to be able to program and do charts that really tell a story is a hugely marketable skill.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That's awesome. Molly, how about you?
Yeah, so I have a MPH. I did the dual program. That's really my only like formal other certificate. I did the CPH certificate along with the MPH. To be really direct in answering the question, I feel like I've certainly used evaluation methodologies and public health methodologies, and my experience with the subject matter in public health, I've certainly used in my career. It's hard to tell like how much it's propelled my career, like how much have I gotten interviews because I also have an MPH on top of anthropology. Like it's very hard to discern how much that is true. I would say like early in my career, that was probably more true than it is now because I think it's more based on my experience. And then I guess like my advice would be like, I think formal trainings can be helpful, and I'll say more on that in a minute, but I think like what I have found more helpful is not like just laying credential on top of credential, but like getting to know particular softwares that maybe we don't have exposure to in the program or like aren't in your job. And so like using very easy to learn softwares like Canva and Miro, which allow you to facilitate workshops very easily. And like the bar to entry is like, I have zero graphic design skills and like I can build a kind of pretty deck in Canva. And like I think some of the things that I would suggest are like maybe more low hanging fruit. And the last thing I'll say is that I think what I'm about to say is probably controversial, maybe among some people here and more broadly, but I actually think like layering your credentials too much or getting too many skills outside of like, say if you want to do research, going and getting an SEO marketing certification or picking up a bunch of skills there, learning a ton of Excel or learning a ton of graphic design, for example, I think they can actually hurt you in the job market. So I think in smaller organizations, it's more likely that you're wearing a ton of different hats and doing all of those things. But once you get into organizations over a couple thousand people, roles tend to be more specialized. And so I have hired people in the past for research roles. And if I saw somebody that just had tons of different certificates that didn't really aren't super core to the research process, I might question if their skills were deep enough. And so I also think like the other side of that is like, if you know how to do it, somebody will ask you to do it. And so if you know how to do SEO marketing or graphic design, that might become part of your core job function. And you should think very hardly if you want that to become part of your core job function, because I very much want to be a researcher and a strategist, and I don't want to do anything else besides that. And so I feel as if I got more certificates that were, and I feel like I know how to do research pretty well. I can always learn more, but I do feel like if I start doing other things, then I'm going to be kind of pushed into those things in my day-to-day. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Molly. Danielle, any training that you use as well in the outside of anthropology? And Erica has just plopped a bunch into the chat for us.
Yeah.
So maybe we should be thinking about anything in addition to what has already been mentioned.
Yeah, mural is fun just to go and dig around in anyways. So I actually came through the program as a medical anthropologist, and that's where I was working. But I also graduated during the first economic slowdown. And so the recession hit my role pretty hard. And I could do the research that I half of my grant was for, but I couldn't do the project management because it required things like handling petty cash for physicians, and I was just not interested in it. So that role completely fizzled away, as in Danielle got fired. And I had to look for something else. And in the Bay Area at the time, research was not what folks want. My particular brand of research, like medical anthropology, this very specialized sort of view into the world, was already handled. It's oversaturated. There's incredible programs there and there's incredible researchers there. So what was I going to do? Informational interviews once again. I actually sent a panicked email to Christina Wasson, and I was like, I have to be a business anthropologist now. There's nothing else I can do here. And she pointed me back in that direction. So my training actually came on the heels of like talking to these folks, doing some interviews, and them telling me, go read this book, go listen to this lecture, go do these things, because this was also a time before UX was available as any sort of like, especially UX research, as any sort of like degree or like certification. You did it because you were a designer or you were an engineer. You didn't, and if you're a researcher, you probably came from one of those backgrounds and you got sucked into those spaces, or you were a psychologist. And that was what was happening in this space. So my education was very rough and ready, very like scrappy, putting it together as I went along. Following up on like what Molly had said, there's a lot more opportunities when you get into some of these larger companies. I never really wanted to work at a larger company. I was very like not like, this is not something that I wanted to do. But after spending time at Ancestry, which is not nearly as big as Google, but still a pretty large company, the access to education and additional like things that you can like just learn on the fly is amazing. And so there's a whole lot of other things that I have that I've put in my pocket. Doug, be really proud of me. I learned R so I could code in the past couple of years, which was incredibly like that's not how my brain works. But my stats look great now. Yeah, it'll show up in interesting ways, and when it does, take advantage of it, I think is really the message.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And that actually even crisscrosses with one of the questions about what happens after you graduate, right? And what do you do when you feel like you're at a dead end, and reaching out to your professors, right? It's always going to be there for you. So Janelle, any additional skills? Well, I think we know at least one of them that you've obtained.
Yes, I mean, the main one is really just the law degree. It takes about 3 years to get a law degree. If you're in a part-time program, it could take 4 years. But time goes by fast if you are interested in it and motivated to be an attorney, be a lawyer. And there's just so many ways you can contribute to society as an attorney with an anthropology background. You can work in either as an attorney for government, like as a public defender, or you can be an immigration attorney, or you can work doing policy work with government or with a nonprofit organization. So I really encourage anyone who's interested in law or in policy to pursue a law degree as well. It's versatile, so you can, be a practicing attorney or not. And really just use the background in anthropology to challenge some of these systems and institutions, like the criminal justice system and the legal system and the ethnocentrism of the legal system and some of our laws and policies. Especially if you're interested in advocating for a particular group or community or population, definitely recommend you getting a law degree.
Fantastic. How about for you, Autumn? Having coming into anthropology with so much experience, can you talk about maybe some of your other training?
Yeah, so I'd like to really quickly run through some of the other training and how it's benefited me. And then I'd also like to respond to Molly's point of view in the context of that. So as it relates to the other training, I have a dual degree in mathematics and Spanish. And that has been extremely helpful because I'll give an example for the math. We recently did a 52-week longitudinal study that was qual and quant for clients. And upon understanding the qualitative learnings, she had a question about additional analyses that could be done with a quantitative survey. having a math degree enabled me to look through the quantitative survey and determine, can we do need gap analyses, impact analyses? But it's having that math background to know the possibilities of extracting different higher order analyses from a quantitative survey. The Spanish degree, extremely useful when you're working in international business. When I'm on the ground in Guadalajara and I'm in a brand marketing meeting and we need to review a brand pyramid, there's not a need to translate it to English for me. I can review it with the team in Spanish, which is important when you think about building brands and advertising. It has to be true to the local language. So having a degree in another language, extremely helpful. And then I have a certificate in international finance from NYU. And this is important because when you're in business, even though you are a researcher in business, if you're working with senior stakeholders, they need you to understand business, not just research. It's important at senior levels that you have a broader understanding of the workings of the economy, the business, and finance. And then I also have a certificate from Notre Dame in digital marketing. And that's important because, again, if you're doing brand work, you have to understand intimately the touch points that are being used to reach constituents. So I understand that in certain research roles, being specialized is advantageous. I also know that in senior roles, if your goal is to climb to senior levels in a large organization, being what we refer to as a generalist is extremely important. So in my role, leading the entire insights and analytics function worldwide at Revlon, I could not have done that well if I did not have a broader skill set beyond research. So I just think it really comes down to, what are your aspirations as a researcher? And that will guide you in determining how broad you need to go in acquiring other trainings and skill sets.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to our next segment, which is on the job market. And in the interest of time, as well as in the interest of flow, let's let this be more of a conversation between the panelists. And so the question sort of broadly that we want to pose to you is what advice that you have to graduates on how they should prepare themselves for the job market. And so this could be about qualifications. It could be about how to market yourself. It could be about networking. And so what do you guys think? Maybe talk amongst yourselves and play off of yourselves as you've already have been. Kathy, you have your hand up, so call on you. Yes.
So I already mentioned that I had been a programmer for many years, and it's not because I'm a wonderful outgoing person. So hearing the same advice about networking for my entire life, I still said, no, it's just not true. But it is true, because if it wasn't for networking, I never would have gotten the job that I have now. I was stuck as a programmer. I was typecast. And until I told the right person in my organization my elevator pitch, there was no hope that I was going to make that jump. So believe it, networking is really important.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I mean, in my work, every time somebody asks me for this kind of advice, the thing I say is go to everything. That was my hustle. I went to everything. So when I was already in Haiti when I did the UNT program, and I structured my thesis around the work that I was actually doing. And at the time I was working with 2 different organizations. I left one in the middle of it, which was supposed to be my client. I had to find a new client. But I've since been doing consulting, basically. And consulting is quite a hustle. And consulting in development in Haiti is a whole other level of just nightmares. And so at the beginning, I was very nervous about talking about money. I didn't really want to talk. It was very uncomfortable. Now I will just cut right to the chase and just get like, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is how much you're going to pay me. This is when I'm going to, and I will like just loop in, invoicing conversations right in the middle. So I'm not telling you to like, don't be nervous about that, because you will be, but understand that nervousness will pass. You'll get over it. But I think definitely like I went to everything. I literally like I went to things that had nothing to do with the sector that I was working in, because that's where I met so many people, and that's literally how I bounced from one opportunity to another. And today I am literally refusing work, and that took me. I've been in Haiti for almost 10 years now. I worked with the UN. I worked with a lot of different organizations. The UN is not a great place to network. Just going to throw that out there. But, you know, going to any sort of like professional association, those are also really, really excellent places to start. If you're looking for informational interviews, those are a great place to find your subjects. And just participate in whatever thing seems interesting. Find a way to participate. The trainings are great as networking opportunities, actually. All of the trainings that I've done at the IDS, I've built some phenomenally productive relationships through those opportunities. So don't discount those as networking opportunities.
Fantastic. Anyone else want to jump in?
I can. So I was just going to say, I'm going to jump on the broken record train on the networking, because networking, always important. Something that always frustrated me was that people would just say, you need to network. You need to network. You need to network. Networking is key. Nobody ever says how to network. They say, oh, go to LinkedIn. Cool. It's a website. There's a whole lot of people on LinkedIn, and that doesn't tell anybody anyway in how to actually engage with people. So yes, going to just about anything you can. If you are working with a client, that is your ground zero for networking. Because as the people in any organization you can get in with, right? If it's a client, if it's someplace that you volunteer with, because it's somewhere or a field that you are interested in, that's going to broaden your network. So start there. So as an example, my thesis client was United Through Reading, a military serving nonprofit. Their executive director and my point of contact moved to another organization, Our Military Kids. You know, 10 months later, I get an email asking if I can do research for them, because I did research in the past for their sister organization. I did about 2 years. It was pro bono for me because I was employed in another sector. For me, it was just expanding my portfolio. But after 2 years of that, I decided I wanted to move into military research full time. And within 4 months, I had a job, because I had developed connections throughout the military sector just by doing projects and attending things. I signed up for every single listserv I could and was on every webinar I could be on just as a participant. And anybody you connect with in a chat, right, in the back end, just like people are doing right now in Zoom, that's somebody you can message on LinkedIn. Anybody you meet through volunteer work is somebody you can message on LinkedIn. And the more people that you just have brief conversations with, that's what opens doors down the line.
I'll jump in. Oh, sorry, Autumn, were you gonna go?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, but if you want to go first, Molly, that's cool.
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to add on to maybe something I said earlier about like the size of an organization. I think that it's hard to think about if you don't have the experience, but like thinking about what kind of organization you want to work in. Do you want to work in a small organization or a big organization? Do you want to work in-house? Do you want to consult? How do you feel about tracking hours if you're consulting? What kind of work-life balance do you want, or are you okay with? Do you want to work with other researchers, or do you want to be the only researcher? What kind of funding structures do you want to work under, or are you okay with? And so I think like trying to think about the things beyond what topic do you want to work on, or kind of what core role do you want to play, can be instrumental in kind of like ending up in a place that you're happy.
So I'll just build upon what everyone has said with a few things in terms of preparing for what's next. One, I think developing executive presence is absolutely critical. Dr. Henry and I talked about that several times. And if you're looking to be competitive in the marketplace, it's just essential. The other thing is project management skills. There was mention of things like Excel, but using different types of software for project management. And then if you're going into business, I can't stress enough how important it is to really have business acumen to complement the anthropology skills. And then I would say, as you're going into the marketplace, know your USP, your own unique selling proposition. What is it that makes you unique as you're positioning yourself to be competitive in the search? And then along with being aware of your USP, know your worth. And I say that because I can't tell you how many people, researchers and anthropologists that I've encountered who are accepting compensation less than they have to. And in fact, I had a situation recently where a brilliant researcher came to me and I asked, what would you like to be compensated? And she told me, and I said, I'm not going to pay you that because I'd be doing a disservice to pay you so little. But she didn't understand her own worth. And so my company ended up paying her well above what she asked for. But the issue is there are other companies that wouldn't do that. And she's leaving compensation for her wonderful expertise on the table. So know your USP, your unique selling proposition, and step through the door knowing your worth.
I'm going to add on the whole networking thing as well. I think almost all of the jobs that I've had are through contacts that I've made. So it's really about expanding your network through different organizations, community organizations. I mean, hobbies, like even salsa dancing. You know, there were some salsa dancing groups that I was a part of, and turns out there were a lot of lawyers there. And so, yeah, I mean, you can just honestly expanding your network, getting out there, talking to folks, getting curious about what other people do, and then sharing your background and the work that you do and some of what you're interested in. And then before you know it, months, years later, you know, folks are contacting you about amazing opportunities in the area or field that you're trying to get into that's more compatible and in line with what you wanted to do to begin with. When I left UNT, I was a little bit scared because I was like, bachelor's in anthropology, you know, how there's no job title out there with just like anthropologists, right? And so it's about, I started volunteering and working with nonprofit organizations here in Houston. And I started volunteering, and then I got job offers to intern and then to work full time. And then there were other opportunities that developed and came out of that in San Antonio with MALDEF. And then they called me from Austin that they wanted me to come back and work in Houston. And so came back and worked in Houston. And then it's also the connections that I made during that time in the nonprofit that has helped me get the positions that I have now as an attorney, first as an immigration attorney, and then now as a public defender. So yeah, the networking is a big deal. And I sometimes am a little bit shy as well, but, you know, just really try to put yourself out there as much as you can and get curious about making connections and meeting people.
Fantastic. And so, oh, good. We have a question that has been posted in the chat. Gabriela Gutierrez, who is a second-year master's student, asks to all of the panelists, do you all have any additional perspectives or ideas on figuring out our worth and negotiating our salaries? Good question.
I can speak to this because I wanted to made sure I brought this up. Molly, formerly last name Shade, now Rimpeats, and I talk a lot about this in We're Still Close. She was in the program, and how, like, I think a lot of us, I won't say any of us, but like her and I know several people are very open to talking about our salaries. If you contact us directly, like, I will tell you how much money I make and what my career progression has been. But to answer the question in which you don't have to reach out to me, I think there's tools like Glassdoor that you can use. If you're working in tech, there's Blind and levels.fyi. And one tactic I use, and maybe people are more successful at once they're further in their career, but is like, if there's a job listing, ask what the compensation range is before you interview. And if it's too high or too low. I hope it's not too high. But if it's too low, then, say no and move on if you don't think that you can live on that or it's not market. And so, yeah, those are just some of my quick points. But I would love, Lisa, if UNT wants to do a seminar on this, I think there's a lot of people from, especially my area, that would love to talk about it.
I think I can jump in first because I'm a consultant, so I have to do this every single time. But I think my sister is an HR generalist, so I've asked her a lot about this too. And one of the things that she says is to start, first of all, figure out your cost of living, your actual cost of living. Start with what's actually happening, and then that's your range. Just start with what's actually happening and what your ideal is, and be realistic. I mean, if you're fresh out of grad school, you're not billing top dollar. Be realistic, but don't be afraid. I mean, be open to negotiation also if they're sort of, if you're too high for them or something like that, but be open to negotiation. But definitely be realistic about what your actual cost of living is and what that actually looks like. Because I work, and sometimes, I'm a consultant, so it works a little differently with different clients. I'll work with some clients that I think, it's very values aligned, it's very mission aligned for me. And I won't give them my top price. But then if I work with somebody who I think, fundamentally is problematic to social justice initiatives, I will adapt it. But I think you have to also look at the reality of your situation and what you're willing to do for how much. And so definitely do the math first.
So first of all, I'll say if there's anyone here who is a UT student and you want to chat one-on-one on tips for negotiating salary, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to chat that. I've been in business 26 years, both on the client side, negotiating my compensation at Fortune 500s, but also owning my own business and determining how much we will charge clients for our work. So hit me up on LinkedIn, happy to talk about it. But knowing your worth is grounded in knowing what you uniquely bring to the table, both in terms of your skill set as well as your personal brand. And if you haven't yet developed a personal brand for yourself, I highly encourage you to think about that and what you would want that personal brand to be, such that it authentically reflects who you are, your values, and your aspirations. But always negotiate, because if you don't negotiate, you're leaving money on the table.
Autumn, what is your personal brand? What's an example?
So I will not share my personal brand publicly, but I will tell you my personal brand is very much reflected even in the colors that I wear in meetings. I have a specific palette of colors that I will and will not wear in meetings, which is why you will see me in a lot of blacks, grays, and red tones, because those project what I aspire to be in terms of my personal brand. But happy to chat it. I used to teach a workshop on personal branding, so happy to chat it. Hit me up on LinkedIn.
This is an excellent networking example, because I'm definitely hitting up Autumn later, because the work she does is super fascinating and I will be calling.
Yeah, let's just chat. I mean, happy to chat it. I'm passionate about this stuff, and no, I'm not charging anyone. Let's just talk.
And I'm going to say same thing. So by all means, shoot me a message too on LinkedIn. Just say that you are part of this, so that I have some sort of reference, but networking starts today.
I love it.
Well, everyone, I think we are just about out of time. We've got one more question in the chat. I don't want to keep anyone. I know you all have very busy schedules. The curling is still on in the Olympics. I know the pool is real to go. But I don't want to keep you all. Thank you so very much for all of your time. We really appreciate your insight. Our students appreciate your insight, and we love to see your faces. Any closing remarks? Dr. Henry, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you to the amazing panelists who took time out of their lives, their schedules to join us and to share their wealth of knowledge with our students and alumni and friends of the department. tonight. It has been amazing. And I know many of them have invited you to network with them on LinkedIn and are sending emails right now in the chat. So if you ask a question in the chat and it didn't get answered, I'm sure you can reach out to them or send the question to me and I'll reach out to the panelists and get you connected. So thank you everyone for your time tonight and your expertise.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, UNT, for having us.
Wow.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Good to see everyone.
Have a great night.